Hey guys, welcome back. Glad to have you in the JeepSolid garage again. So we're going to continue with the rebuild on this 4.0 Inline 6. We're going to finish disassembling the engine. This should be fun. Rattlesnakes!
Don't drop it.
Alright, so let's get this engine out where we can work on it. And I'm excited to introduce my new boom mic. So this new boom mic is going to greatly help with my audio because I record in a garage. That's hard enough as it is. So it gets echoey, and a lot of times I'm standing far away from the camera, far away from the microphone, and so you get that real bad echo of the garage. This is going to bring the microphone a lot closer, just help up my audio that much. And this is thanks to my patrons out there. Thank you guys so much helping support my channel. So I'm glad my videos have helped you guys out. I really appreciate it. Helps me buy more equipment and make things better. So if my videos have helped you out and you're interested in helping support the JeepSolid Garage, I'll be sure to link my Patreon account in the description below. Alright, so like I've said, we've got the Inline 6 here. What have we done so far? Obviously we've got the engine out, and I'll link the video series of this complete rebuild in the description below as well, so you can follow along with that. If you haven't subscribed to the channel, be sure to do that. I've got all kinds of Jeep related videos. So we've got the camshaft out, the lifters, the rocker arms, the push rods, what else? Oil pumps off, oil pans off, obviously. Let's flip it over here and take a look at I had to use a ridge reamer on the top of the pistons. Let's flip it over here and take a look at that. So before we can go popping the pistons out, these older 6-cylinder 4-liter and the 4 cylinders, when you start getting a lot of miles on them, you get a little ridge around the top here that is carbon buildup, a little bit of wear. You have to remove the ridge on the top here before you can drive the pistons out, otherwise you'll end up breaking something. So I ended up using a ridge reamer on the ridge right up at the top here to get rid of that. You need to do that before you can pop the pistons out. I'll be sure to link the video of the ridge reamer in the description below as well. So if you do have a ridge there that you can feel with your fingernail, you just got to get that removed before you go popping the pistons out. So we got that all done. Let's move on to taking the pistons out. Alright, now we have our bearing caps here on our rods, and we've got our bearing caps, our caps here over the crankshaft. And you'll notice on all the crankshaft caps, these are all labeled. Starting at the front here, 1, 2, 3, and so on, all the way down to number 6. Well, number 6 is right there, kind of gummed up a little bit. And then you have your rear main bearing cap right here, which doesn't have a number on it, but we know where it goes. It only goes in one spot. Now the caps on the rods here, these are not labeled, so, and if you have a stamp set or something, you want to go ahead and label all these on the rods because they have to go back, all these pieces have to go back in the exact same spot. And on the balance plate on the end here, the little weight on the end, you can go ahead and put a little mark if you have a stamp set, those work perfect, or a little punch or something to just mark these so you know which one goes where. So I've got piston 1 here through 6. I'm going to start with this one. I'm just going to label them in order. Alright, let's start here with piston number 1. We're going to break these loose evenly, so I'm just going to go kind of loosen them each side at the same time so that the pressure is released off of it evenly. And with that, our bearing cap should come loose. Sometimes you gotta kind of tap on them with a rubber mallet if they're kind of fused in there. Yeah, this one's gonna be a little bit of a bear. Here we've got the journal of the crankshaft. Here is our bearing on the cap. Pop this guy out, take a look at it. So sometimes this will get stuck down on there, left in place, so just make sure you get it out of the way because you don't want it just falling on the ground. Like I almost dropped my bearing cap there. Where'd it go? There it is. And this is why I labeled them before I took them off. So I got my little dot here on the bottom. It tells me this is the piston number 1. This is the bottom side of it. I'm working on the camshaft side of the engine here. So set the bearing cap out of the way. Here's the bearing. And now when we're taking the bearings out, we're looking for any signs of excessive wear or gouges. This one's a little, you can see little grooves there. It's a little rough, not super smooth, so it's a good thing we're replacing all these bearings. And on the crank itself, you can see a little oil hole right there. So when this spins around, it can squirt a little bit of oil onto the bearing. That's why these are very specific in how they go in place. There's a little notch on the bearing there as well. So with the cap off, I can set this out of the way. I'm going to just push the bearing back in place here. So I can take a closer look at it later if I want to. If I can get the little bugger back in place. Set this out of the way. Now over the threads of the rod here, we need to protect our crankshaft, right? This super smooth surface on this journal, we want to keep that super smooth. So when we're dropping the piston out, we don't want the threads on the rod here to scrape that at all. So this is what we're going to do. So if you have little pieces of rubber hose or something similar that you can fit over the top of these to just kind of protect them. That kind of slid down when I pushed on it, didn't it? We've got the top side of that bearing on the rod still, so don't forget about that. But now that we've got the threads protected, we can push this rod down, this piston out. If it gets stuck in there, sometimes you got to use a wooden hammer, the handle of a hammer or something to kind of tap on it. This one seems like it's sliding out pretty easy. You also don't want to scrape the walls of your cylinder on the way down. There we go. Okay, now that we have the piston out, we want to take a real good look at it. Inspect the skirt, the rings here. Look for any excessive wear. Your skirts can actually crack. These rings don't look that bad. Look at your oil ring. We're going to be replacing all of this with my new Engine Tech kit, but still it's a good idea to take a quick look at it. Throw our bearing cap back on. This with my little mark on the bottom there. I know this is piston number 1. And this is the bottom side, the camshaft side. Let's move on to piston number 2. Now see this end play right here? It's going to be really hard to show that on camera. Hopefully that can pick it up a little bit better. That's your bearing rod end play. It's a good idea to take a set of feeler gauges and just check to make sure that this is within spec. So here in our handy little book, this is a 4-liter. Let's say crankshaft and connecting rods, diameter, bearing oil clearance, connecting rod side clearance, end play. So we want it to be between, boy, it's hard to point and record and focus. We want it to be between 1/100th and 19 thousandths of an inch. So we can use our little feeler gauges, slip it down in there, and just make sure that it's within that spec as we're going along, taking these pistons out. And if you find that these are out of spec, then you're going to be replacing your rods. All right, let's get these last 2 pistons out. All right, 1 more to go. So this has been just a super fun project. I'm really happy that I could take the time to rebuild this. I know we're getting loose enough. I don't even have to use yeah, there we go. It's taken quite a while because, you know, as a lot of you know, this is not my full-time job. So I work on it when I can and slowly getting it done, but subscribe and check out the playlist where I take this through the whole rebuild. So that playlist, I think I have it starting clear back at taking the engine out. There's like, I don't know, 17 episodes or something so far. It's been kind of fun. I'm glad you guys could follow along with it. And when I'm all said and done here, I'm going to make one long video of the entire rebuild process. My goal, I don't know, do I call myself out on camera here and tell you that my goal is to have the Jeep running by spring, honestly, realistically, probably summer. I don't know, you guys have been following along for a while. What do you think? It's a realistic timeline for me to get this up and going. I still want to take the head. I'm going to take the head down to a machine shop, have them Magnaflux it. I'll try to show you guys that. And get them to grind the surface of it, just make sure it's flat and smooth. The heads on these are notorious for warping a little bit, so hopefully I'm not buying a new head. That would kind of set me back a bit. But if I could just stay home and work on this all the time, that'd be awesome. I'd get it done a lot quicker. But being that this is not my full-time job, it takes me, ouch, pinch my thumb there. It takes me quite a bit longer. So, but for those of you that just found my channel recently, I'm just whipping right through this thing. Okay, now let's move on to the crankshaft here. Now, like I've already talked about, all these bearing caps are numbered 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. The rear main cap back here, it obviously only goes right there. It's not really labeled. Still don't think it's labeled. I don't see a number on it. The other thing we can do, though, is we can check for end play on our crank here. Try to shove it all the way forward, and then there's a thrust bearing in there that we're going to be replacing, so I'm not super worried about the end play. But you push it all the way forward, check your gap with that thrust bearing, and just make sure that you're in spec on that as well. The other thing on your crank here is it should spin freely by hand here, fairly smoothly. This one, even with these old bearings in it, actually seems to spin pretty nicely. If it's getting caught up anywhere, like rough anywhere, or not rough, but just kind of stuck anywhere, then you've got an issue there. But this just feels real smooth all the way around. And you can see the thrust bearing is underneath cap number 3 right here. Alright, let's go along and break all the bolts loose on the bearing caps here on the crank. Simply break them loose. Might get my bigger breaker bar just to make it easier on myself. Here we go. I got the Big Daddy. I've used this thing a few times. It's fairly new to me, but the few times I've used it, I really like it. It is very sturdy. Gives me a lot of leverage. And I have it linked in the description below if you're interested in it. I've got all these guys loosened up. We're going to keep the bearings in order. Of course, they're labeled, but we just want to make sure that they stay in the same orientation. It's still on there. And as we're removing all these bearing caps, we're inspecting the bearings for any signs of cracks, excessive wear, gouges, grooves, anything like that. And man, boy, it stinks. All right, let's remove the rest of these caps. Boy, this rear main bearing seal, rear main gasket is kind of shot. And so let's take a look at that thrust bearing here. So there's journal 1, 2, 3. So on the third journal, you can see that bearing down in there, how it kind of wraps around each side. So that's different than these other guys, where the bearing is just flat on the surface of the journal there. We'll pull the crankshaft out and take a closer look at it, but I just want you guys to kind of see how that thrust bearing wraps around there. And that's what holds your crankshaft in place for the end play, to make sure you don't have too much end play in there. Your thrust bearing is involved in that. Alright, and with that, we can lift the crank out. Now, this thing is heavy. It's 56 pounds? I want to say 53, that's my guess. I can't remember off the top of my head. It's 50 something pounds, so it's heavy, so just be ready. Actually, let's warm up a little bit. Alright, that should be good. Alright, there we go. There's the crankshaft. So we're going to take a look at all the journals on it real well as well, and just make sure it's in good shape, that we don't have any excessive wear on it. The sprocket down here, this is going to come off as well. Here you can get a better look at that thrust bearing on the third journal down here, compared to these other guys that are just flat. They don't wrap around the side here. Now it's time to give this thing a really good bath. Take all the freeze plugs out, some of these oil plugs, the threaded plugs there. Still got to hone the cylinders and get it all real cleaned up and ready for reassembly. So, realistic guess, when do you think I'll have this thing up and running? So, I don't know, leave a comment down below. Be sure to check out some of my favorite tools and links down below, and I'll catch you guys next time. So, I'm going to call it a day. Thanks for watching, have a good day.